What's up guys, my name is Ace, and with the launch of Season 1 for Modern Warfare 2, something new that they added are blueprints that have what they call pro tuning on them. So just like in other recent Call of Duty games, these blueprints will have a predetermined set of attachments on them, and they'll have a different overall look to the gun. However, this time around, these also include tuning by default, even if you don't have that gun maxed out. Now, unfortunately, at least in the game's current state, you can't actually see what they've tuned exactly. Like, you can see that they have tuned various attachments, but if you try to enter the tuning menu, it automatically resets all tuning for the gun, and the same thing happens if you just want to swap one attachment out. If you want to take an attachment off or put a different attachment on the gun, it will automatically wipe that tuning from the gun. And since they do sort of hide this in the background, a lot of people have been asking me, are these pro-tuned guns actually good? Are they better than the non-pro-tuned version of the gun using the same attachments? And that's what I wanted to do at least a spot check on today. Of course, I'm not testing every single one of these pro-tuned weapons. At this stage through the Battle Pass, I've unlocked a couple pro-tuned SMGs, and so I want to put those ones to the test. Now, keep in mind, all these comparisons aren't looking at the base gun versus the gun with all these attachments and the tuning. I'm just looking at the tuning aspect of this. So I'm going to be comparing the pro-tuned blueprint with the same gun with the exact same attachments, but no tuning at all, or all the tuning set to default. And the first one we're going to take a look at here is the Vel 46 Mythmaker. With this, if you look at the description on the top left, it says this is a balanced build, and it says precision sight picture, aim down sight speed, and recoil stabilization. And you can see all the attachments we've got on there. Now let's jump into the direct comparison with this tuned version versus the exact same setup with no tuning applied. And let's start this off with recoil, because that is a very important aspect, and one of the few areas where in my testing at least, tuning at least makes somewhat of a difference if you do it right. For most other areas, I've generally only seen negligible changes, and when we look at the direct comparison with the pro-tuned versus no tuning at all, there's really not much of a difference, and if anything, if you made me choose between one of these two recoil patterns, I'd probably be leaning a bit more toward the side with no tuning applied on the gun. Although, to be clear, it's not like a massive difference. I honestly probably wouldn't even notice much of a difference while playing in a game. But that is just recoil. Maybe that wasn't really their focus with tuning with this. We can't really tell because we can't see those tuning sliders. So let's have a look at some of the other really important stats while playing in a game. First up, our aim down sight speed. While this is hand tested and I can't have 100% millisecond accurate aim down sight speeds, it does appear the pro-tuned version aims down sight just slightly faster than the non-tuned version, at around 365 milliseconds, whereas without tuning, it's more like 370 milliseconds. Honestly, you'll probably never be able to tell the difference between these two when you're actually in a game, and I doubt this will ever make the difference in a gunfight. But then after that, I did want to test the aim walking movement speed, since some of these attachments that we can tune will have an effect on aim walking movement speed, but it turns out there was no change here whatsoever. And same thing with our sprint out time. I just wanted to make sure I was doing a test on that, and at least with the hand testing that I can do, there is no measurable difference here whatsoever to our aim down sight speed. So when it comes to all of these stats, again, I'm seeing essentially a negligible difference here. But finally, another stat that is impacted by tuning various attachments on this gun is our aiming stability. And so I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison here. And once again, I'm really not seeing much of a difference here, at least not a super noticeable difference. Perhaps the side with no tuning has a little bit more sway. It's moving a little bit faster than the left side. But really, I'm not seeing a noticeable enough difference here that you would actually be able to tell in a real game. The only noticeable thing here is the eye distance has changed slightly with tuning. It looks like they went a little bit farther away from the optic. But outside of that, I'm not really seeing any meaningful differences with the tuning applied here. And as a result, at least in this scenario, is the pro-tuned version better than the non-tuned version with the same attachments? Honestly, any differences that we have here, I would call effectively negligible. I don't think this pro-tuned version is going to get you any kills that you wouldn't have gotten with no tuning applied on the gun. But that is just looking at one pro-tuned gun. Maybe that one's not a good example. Let's try a different one here. And with this, we're going to be going with the Lachmann Sub, or the MP5 Espionage pro-tuned blueprint. And with this one on the top left, it says it has sound suppression, recoil smoothness, and aiming stability. And once again, let's have a look at the recoil comparison, both with and without this pro tuning. And when we have a look at them side by side, I'm actually noticing a bit more of a difference than with the previous setup. You can see without tuning, the total vertical magnitude of recoil is slightly higher without tuning. And we're also seeing some perhaps slightly better groupings with that Pro Tune setup once you get into like the 3rd to 10th shot fired, we'll say, within that little zone, which is quite an important zone of your recoil. I am seeing a tighter group, and I do feel like that would be slightly easier to control than without tuning. Now, beyond those shots, for like the second half of your magazine, I actually think the no tuning version is a little bit better. It doesn't kick side to side as much. We're not seeing as much of that side to side bounce. And therefore, I think for sustained accuracy, no tuning is going to be better. But initial recoil is almost always going to be more important than sustained recoil. And as a result, this time, if I had to pick between these two, I would lean a bit more in the direction of that Pro Tune version when we're looking at recoil. Again, though, I don't see this being a massive difference maker in most situations that you find yourself in while using this gun. But that's just the recoil. Let's have a bit of a deeper look. When it comes to our aim down sight speed, I'm not measuring any change here whatsoever. They seem to have the exact same aim down sight speed. However, our aim walking movement speed is actually noticeably better without the tuning on this gun. So if you are planning to strafe while aiming down sight in a gunfight, the Pro Tuned version is going to hold you back a bit more. Having said that, though, when we take a look at our sprint out time, our standard sprint out time, I'm not noticing any difference here, at least with my hand testing. I'm not able to measure any noticeable difference. And therefore, if I can't measure it going frame by frame, you're never actually going to notice a difference in the game. However, with our tactical sprint out time, I am noticing a slight improvement with that Pro Tuned version. And therefore, if you're sprinting into a gunfight, the Pro Tuned version is going to be a little bit better than the non-tuned version. So at least this time, we can actually start to see some fairly clear pros and cons with the tuning. It's not all upsides by having this Pro Tuned, but at least we're seeing some somewhat noticeable differences here. But finally, let's have a look at our aiming stability comparison here. And with this, it looks like the Pro Tuned version actually has noticeably worse aiming stability than the non-tuned version of this gun. Additionally, it looks like they tuned the eye distance to be a little bit closer this time around for the Pro Tuned version, and that area really just comes down to preference, but I would say no tuning wins out overall when we're looking at aiming stability. So at least with this particular Pro Tuned build, we are actually starting to see some pros and cons come out with it. I wish we could see this a lot more clearly in game so you could see that you are sacrificing some of your aim walking movement speed for a slightly improved sprint out speed, for instance, but there's no indication of that in the game, and you can't even check out these sliders, which I do find to be a little bit frustrating. It seems like they're purposely trying to hide this information from you. But overall, when we just take a step back and look at the tuning comparisons that I've done here, are these Pro Tuned blueprints noticeably better, or at least very noticeably different from the non-tuned versions of the gun? Generally speaking, no. You may notice some very slight differences here or there, but it's not like this Pro Tuning suddenly immediately makes the gun noticeably better. I honestly don't think this tuning is going to affect the outcome of very many gunfights while you're playing in the game, and I do think it is a bit of a gimmick, especially with them hiding that information from you. I think they want to keep a little bit of mystery in the air, so perhaps there's a bit more of a placebo effect while using these Pro Tuned blueprints in the game. Also, I should mention, just in general, outside of the whole tuning thing, with these blueprints, typically the attachments you're seeing on these aren't actually ideal setups to begin with, and we've been over that for several years already with Call of Duty. It's very rare that you're going to get a blueprint that's actually like a meta version of the gun with the best attachments possible. So honestly, if I had one of these blueprints and I really like the look of it, I'm likely going to be swapping out attachments and therefore losing that Pro Tuning anyway, and you're probably going to see far better results by choosing proper attachments. So really, if you want to use a blueprint, don't worry about adjusting things and losing that quote-unquote pro tuning, because these are by no means pro setups. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Once again, it looks like tuning is not the big difference maker that a lot of other content creators try to make it out to be. I've seen so many huge claims about weapon tuning in this game, and it's always, you're just not doing it right. You have to tune it in this way and not that way. But all of the testing that I've done, keeping in mind I've actually done a lot more in-depth testing that will come out in a video at some point, but I want to make sure I'm covering all of the bases. Honestly, tuning in this game is more of a gimmick than anything in my experience outside of adjusting the eye distance on your optic. That's something that actually can make a pretty big difference, although it is also really subjective. And with that, I'd like to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. Were you surprised by these results? Did you expect to see more of a difference with the pro tuning on this? And also, what do you think about the fact that it seems like they're deliberately hiding all of the tuning information from you with these pro tune blueprints? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.